Thank you, Mr Speaker.
I call William Suasio.
Mr Speaker, three words come to mind listening to that speech: humbug, hogwash and poppycock. On the eve of Christmas, and we've got 14 days before Christmas Day, when most families throughout this country are preparing themselves to find gifts and to celebrate the Christmas spirit of gifting to young people, what do we have from the National Act Māori government? First, there was tax increases for those on 44,000 or less. Second was the 50% reduction in the employer contribution on the KiwiSaver. And now we have the Fire at Will Bill. Fire at Will Bill, Mr. Speaker. This bill is going to create a group of unscrupulous employers whose only desire is to make use of workers for 30 days and then get rid of them. 90 days and then get rid of them. It'll sack new workers without reason, without notice, without a written warning. It'll sack new workers and will not be able to give them the right of personal grievance. That's a right that workers currently have, Mr. Speaker. In short, it's going to strip workers of certainty and confidence in the workplace that they currently have now. And those most affected are the vulnerable workers that they are targeting. And I would say the vulnerable workers that they are targeting are generally Labour supporters. The Minister assumes that the working relationship in the workplace is equal. It assumes that both employer and employee are equal in the workplace. That's the current situation that currently exists under the law that Labour put in place. But what is going to happen now? This new law, this new bill, is going to strip workers off that right, and it will allow and it will undermine that relationship, the relationship that currently exists. And the most affected are the vulnerable, and I would say, sadly, from our part of the world, in Mangere, in Manukau City, in Manurewa, in Otahuhu, because they are targeting young people, and in that part of the world, we have the most young people throughout New Zealand. And for young people who are taking up a new job, young people who are unfamiliar, they're going to be keen as to take on new roles, and they're going to be working hard to try and ensure that they keep their new roles. And what could happen to them? They could be sent a letter, they could be sent a telegram, don't come in on Monday. Or they could be given a phone call, or not even a word. They simply lose their jobs. Because that's what this law provides. No reason, no notice. 90 days, you can work all you want, you can work as hard, and you can lose your job at the flick of a finger by unscrupulous employers. And I say unscrupulous employers, Mr. Speaker, because not all employers are inclined towards what this bill is going to create. The other most vulnerable that this bill targets are womenfolk. Women who are coming back into the workforce, women who are wanting to be able to make ends meet and contribute to the finances of their family. What happens if my sister or my aunt decides, or for some reason during the month is unable to go to work? What happens? They can be fired. That's what this bill provides for. What happens if they call in sick, that they've got to go visit the local school because their child needs some support there, and they can't go into work within those 90 days? They can be fired. That's what this bill provides, without any notice, without any ability or opportunity to be able to put their case forward. Elderly folks are going to be targeted, and they are being targeted under this law. Elderly folks who want to come back and provide a contribution to our economy. What's going to happen to them if, for some reason or other, they've got to go in to see the doctors, go into the hospital, or need to be able to go home, have a bit of a rest? what's going to happen to them in those 90 days? They're going to be fired at will. That's what this bill provides. The most vulnerable of our communities, those who currently are protected under the current legislation, are being targeted, they're being stripped of their rights to be able to take up a personal grievance if they feel that they are justly dismissed. Migrant workers, Māori and Pasifika workers. All of those workers, the most vulnerable in our communities, are being targeted, Mr. Speaker. The Minister says there are going to be opportunities. The only opportunity that I see being legislated here for is the opportunity to take away workers' rights, to sack a new worker, and without the employer taking responsibility for making a bad decision. That's what this bill provides for. It is the opportunity for unscrupulous employers to undermine the union in the workplace, because they can sack a worker within that period if they're wanting to join the union, if they're wanting to be able to meet with a union official. They can sack a worker for those reasons. And that is, I also feel, Mr. Speaker, that as more and more workplaces close and there are more people unemployed in the economic crisis that we are experiencing at the moment, that we're going to have a pool of unemployed workers competing for whatever these jobs might be. And if they're competing for those jobs, what is going to happen to them if after 90 days they have no guarantee of a permanent position? It means that some unscrupulous employer might say, look, I'll keep you on then if you're prepared to forego some of your other conditions and terms. That's a strong possibility under this legislation, because this legislation creates fear, creates uncertainty, and takes away confidence of workers in the workplace. It is wrong for this government to use the financial crisis or the economic crisis as an excuse to take away the rights of workers. Workers want certainty in their employment relations, and workers have fundamental rights which are enshrined in the United Nations Declaration. They have rights to redress, and this government is stripping away that right of personal grievance. The Minister also says that this bill is going to enable the creation of jobs. That is a laugh. That is laughable, Minister. This bill doesn't create a single job. It doesn't. It creates bad employers. It creates bad business practice. And it takes away personal grievance rights from the workers. How many jobs will this bill create, I asked the Minister during Select Committee procedures? There was no answer. That's because that's not the intent of this legislation. The intent of this legislation is to fire at will the most vulnerable workers in our community. The Minister says employer will maintain active relationship and subject themselves to mutual agreements. That is hogwash. Mr. Speaker, in this competitive global economy, the key issue facing our labour market now is how to attract new workers, not how to sack them. It doesn't matter what they say about opportunities and job creation and equality in the workplace. My grandfather says when people say words like that to cover up something, my grandfather says, "E fiu lava ultai puaa e pipilo." I'll translate that for you, Mr. Speaker. It means it doesn't matter how much perfume you pour on pig shit, it still stinks. That's what this bill is about, Mr. Speaker. It stinks. It stinks for our communities. It stinks for workers throughout New Zealand, because what they are wanting to do is take us back to the 1990s, where workers are stripped of all rights in the workplace. So with those words, Mr. Speaker, Labor strongly opposes this act and will vote accordingly.
I regret to advise the member his time has expired. I call upon Colin King.